Today we will discuss Saldaña's 1999 article, Western and Non-Western Science, History and Perspectives. Saldaña begins his text by asking the following question: has a non-Western science ever existed? He then denounces that ethnocentrism, that is, judging another culture solely by the values and standards of one's own culture, has been a limitation for the historical study of world science, as well as to formulate appropriately and give an answer to such a question. At present, we know of historical evidences to respond affirmatively to that question. The history of science has been able to sustain, for example, that in the Chinese, Hindu, and Amerindian civilizations, original scientific knowledge that arose totally independent from the West took place. Then why is Western modern science so dominant? One of the main characteristics of Western modern science is its geographical expansionism in regions outside Europe. This is a transculturation which is historically recent but has reached a very wide span, to the point of becoming a world phenomenon and present. In fact, as we will learn in future sessions, science and empire go hand in hand. The diffusion of science that took place during the last 500 years led to a westernization of the societies where it was implanted. Has this process led to the modernization of non-European societies? This is a tricky question. The idea of the diffusion of science was born with the philosophy of enlightenment and consolidated in the time of the world empires. On the other hand, it formed part of the optimism from the 18th century of the trust in the power of reason, and it was expressed in the controversial notion of progress. The diffusionist position assumed the superiority of the culture and of the Western social organization. And as a result, a missionary purpose, the advance of science, served as encouragement. Although it is necessary to mention it, this noble purpose was also used as a justification of the imperial ambitions of dominance and exploitation of countries and their natural resources. With the independent advance that indeed conceived science as a consequence of the discovery of new worlds for the investigation and of what Europe learned of its contact and of its conflicts with other cultures, Saldaña's argument defends the fundamental fact that science and the European technique were also instruments of the dominance that Europe imposed to the rest of the planet, starting from 1492. In this context, Saldaña's article criticizes the way knowledge and its circulation have been understood. How should we study the history of knowledge? Saldaña gives two guidelines to answer this question. The first one has to do with knowledge and its context of production. Saldaña criticizes the absence of the social local context as an explanatory element of the peripheral scientific activity. Notice from now on the difficulty that it outlines for us by the use of the term peripheral science, because appealing to the local context would demand that it is considered the scientific activity carried out in Beijing, Baghdad, or Rio de Janeiro, for example, as scientific in its own right, and not for their relationship to a center which is outlying. In other terms, if we wish to study the history of knowledge, it is important to establish a nexus or causal bond between the scientific activity and the social context in which it takes place. The second guideline for studying the history of knowledge, according to Saldaña, has to do with power. When studying knowledge, production, and circulation, the asymmetry of power is a reality, impossible to evade for the historian. An omission of this fundamental fact can lead to misleading notions as that of a missionary disinterest of Europe in the propagation of science. All form of political, economic, or cultural relationship that implies subordination or dependence of a nation or society regarding another necessarily makes science acquire a function of dominance from the perspective of the rulers. As for those dominated, the science can end up playing a liberating role when it responds to local motivations. Finally, Saldaña's article invites us to reflect on some important questions that come out of the problem of knowledge circulation. What is progress? What is development? And what does science have to do with these notions? Saldaña identifies the need to rethink the very process of development. Development can no longer be conceived as a singular path, uniform and linear, because that would eliminate the inevitable diversity and cultural experimentation and would gravely limit the creative capacity of humanity with its valuable path and unpredictable future. This calls for a restoration of cultural diversity as an essential part of scientific practice and its development.